You're now watching Q News, and we begin today's bulletin with the latest escalating regional tensions.
كل المستهدفين هن مدنيين.
الوضع شيء مرعب، شيء بخوف.
Iran's President Masoud Pezeshkian has emphasized that Iran will respond appropriately to the recent Israeli strikes. Pezeshkian clarified that Iran does not seek war. He has further attributed rising regional tensions to the Israeli aggression that targeted the Iranian military sites and claimed that it was supported by the United States. Iranian Revolutionary Guard Commander Hossein Salami has credited Iran's air defenses with preventing Israel's recent attack from meeting its objectives. Salami further described Israel's attack as a strategic miscalculation and promised painful consequences beyond Israel's expectations. Israel's Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has claimed that Israel damaged Iran's ability to defend itself and to produce missiles. Netanyahu added that Israel has fulfilled its promise to retaliate against Iranian attacks on its cities and that the attack on Iran was precise and powerful and achieved all its objectives. Tensions in the Middle East have escalated dramatically as the Israeli occupation army launched targeted strikes on Iranian military sites. This operation, framed as retaliation for recent Iranian attacks, raises concerns over a potential cycle of violence in the region.
In a significant escalation in Middle East tensions, the Israeli occupation army conducted targeted strikes on Iranian military sites early on Saturday, October 26th. Israel announced that it had completed precise strikes on military targets in Iran, framing the operation as retaliation for recent attacks allegedly launched from Iran. These strikes followed an Iranian missile barrage on October 1st, in which approximately 200 missiles reportedly targeted Israeli positions, resulting in at least one fatality in the West Bank. Israeli officials characterized the missile barrage as a severe provocation, asserting that Iran had crossed a critical line. An Israeli military spokesperson warned that if the regime in Iran were to make the mistake of beginning a new round of escalation, Israel will be obligated to respond. In Tehran, multiple explosions were reported in the early hours, with state media showcasing the city's air defense systems intercepting incoming projectiles. Iranian sources indicated that military bases in western Tehran had been attacked, although initial reports did not confirm significant damage or casualties. International reactions varied. British Prime Minister Keir Starmer, speaking in Samoa, reiterated Israel's right to self-defense while urging Iran to refrain from retaliation. Meanwhile, reports indicated that the United States was informed of Israel's planned strikes shortly before its execution, but emphasized that American forces were not involved. The attack elicited strong international reactions as numerous countries condemned Israel's military actions against Iran. This recent exchange highlights the fragile nature of Israel-Iran relations, with both sides poised for potential further escalation in an already volatile region.
And for more analysis, we now move to Riham in our newsroom. To you, Riham.
Thank you, Hela. For further analysis on the latest remarks by the Iranian officials, we are joined from Nazareth by Dr. Suhail Diab, the Professor of Political Science. Thank you for joining us here on Q. Firstly, how significant is Iran's commitment to an appropriate response, as they call it, and what might that entail, given Iran's assertions that it does not seek war?
Welcome to you and to your audience at the beginning. In fact, we are in a new phase in the confrontation between Israel and Iran. The benefits or the advantages of this new phase is the direct confrontation that is public and it's announced before or prior to it, not like it was in the past, the shadow war as in the past period. Now we are in a new phase in which the confrontation is public and the competition is international, and it has two sides. The first side is that if it's understood that there are two balanced regional power represented in Israel and Iran, in addition to Arab countries that represent other balance like Egypt, Saudi Arabia, and Turkey, this can be a factor of stability in the region if this is understood and grasped by all the parties. But if this is interpreted by the Israeli side that this is a preparation for the upcoming confrontation and the confrontation would be full of blood as Netanyahu wants, then the matter will turn into transforming the Middle East into a confrontation arena that is endless. This is the current situation. All the parties will see the new situation, and in my opinion, the Iranian side does not want to be dragged into a regional confrontation, and I don't believe that the Iranians would respond to the Israeli aggression against Iran that was limited and under a clear American limit or ceiling. Iran, in contrary, want to exploit this in order to politically invest in the new situation. They keep the card of the right to respond in its hand. I don't believe that Iran would use this card, or at least they would postpone using it. They want to invest politically in two fields. The first field is the international field and the international diplomacy and the Security Council, to send a message that Iran was attacked and this has to be condemned. The second point, which is very important, is the political investment by pushing this situation and using it to stop the war against Gaza and Lebanon, to find diplomatic solutions. There are several diplomatic movements in this regard. However, they haven't been totally fermented or totally finalized to stop this war.
So do you believe Iran's stance against Israeli actions will escalate further regional tensions, particularly with U.S. support cited as a factor?
I think the current condition is very comfortable for the Iranians, meaning that Israel, from one side, with its limited strike, has performed its role. They now have no more cards for Iran. On the contrary, they will think 1,000 times if they think about assassinating an Iranian figure or targeting a strike either to the oil establishments or nuclear facilities. So Israel is now cautious, and the Iranians have the card of response in a positive manner. In other words, the Iranian side is not hurrying up to the regional confrontation, and they don't want it. All the states of the region, including the big states and the international states on top of them, the United States, do not want a regional confrontation in the Middle East for several reasons, and for the interests of all the parties, except for one side, which is the right-wing extreme government of Netanyahu. Let me further elaborate. The deep state of Israel, represented in the Israeli army and the security agencies, do not want a confrontation with Iran. This is very clear, and there are lots of discussions with Netanyahu in this regard. The statements of Gallant yesterday, for example, is a great evidence for this. And Gallant is the president of the Israeli army when he said that we need to resort to political diplomatic solutions because the military solution will lead to nothing. And Israel have to pay very expensive prices and high prices in order to reach such diplomatic solutions. That's why the matter is very complicated.
Okay, that was Dr. Zuhail Diab, the professor of political science. Thank you for your insights. Back to you, Hela, in the studio.
Thank you very much, Rihanna. And we move on with our news bulletin. The Chinese Foreign Ministry spokesman Lin Jian has stressed that recent incidents in the Middle East indicate the urgency of ceasefire. He stated that China opposes violations of other countries' sovereignty and the reckless use of force. The Foreign Ministry spokesman urged all parties to avoid escalating security risks and called on the international community to play a constructive role in fostering conditions to ease regional tensions.
近期发生的一系列事件，再次表明了停火止战的紧迫性。国际社会，特别。
Smoke has been seen billowing from Marja'iyun in southern Lebanon as Israel continued its assault on villages along the Israeli-Lebanese border. The Israeli military has ordered residents of 14 villages in southern Lebanon to evacuate immediately and move north of the Awali River. Lebanon's health ministry has announced that an Israeli strike on Sidon in southern Lebanon killed at least 9 people and injured 25. The Lebanese Ministry of Public Health has reported that 7 people were killed and 17 were injured in an Israeli airstrike targeting Tyre in southern Lebanon. The Israeli attacks on the villages of Tyre and Bint Jbeil districts have continued, with Israeli artillery targeted multiple towns with heavy projectiles. Earlier, Israeli airstrikes targeted the town of Ain Bi'al, killing 7 and injuring 24. The rescue teams are still searching for survivors under the rubble. Hezbollah has announced the targeting of Israeli soldiers in the Misgav settlement, launching both rocket and drone strikes on multiple settlements in northern Israel. The group warned residents of over 20 settlements to evacuate immediately, marking them as legitimate targets. Hezbollah confirmed drone attacks on Kfar Yoval, Zar'it and Shumera, and strikes on Nahariya, Kiryat Shmona, Ilyat and other settlements. Trails of smoke have been seen rising into the sky in northern Israel as sirens sounded, with explosions heard shortly after. The Israeli Medical Service said that following the sirens in the Upper Jalili region, emergency workers were en route to search an area of a reported rocket strike. No casualties were reported. The Lebanese Health Ministry has announced that the death toll from Israeli attacks on Lebanon has climbed to over 2,600, with over 12,400 wounded since October 8th of last year. These figures were released as Israel launched an airstrike in the Lebanese town of Ain Bi'al, causing 7 deaths, including 3 paramedics. At least 24 people were also wounded in the attack. That brings the total number of losses in Lebanon's health and emergency sectors to 168 deaths and more than 270 injuries. And for more developments in Africa, we move to Mark in our newsroom. To you, Mark.
Thank you, Hella. Here is the latest news for Africa. Egyptian President Abdel Fattah el-Sisi has bid farewell to the Algerian President Abdelmajid Tebboune at Cairo International Airport following his visit to Egypt. The two leaders agreed to enhance the distinguished bilateral relations between Egypt and Algeria, reflecting their alignment on various regional and international issues. Egyptian Social Solidarity Minister Dr. Maya Morsi has highlighted the Egyptian government and the Egyptian Red Crescent's ongoing efforts in addressing the escalating crisis in Gaza. She stressed that Egypt remains committed to the rights of those seeking refuge within its borders, providing them with full access to state services. Morsi also outlined support extended to wounded individuals and their companions arriving through Rafah, including psychosocial emergency relief and housing assistance, alongside support for Palestinian students studying in Egypt. The Egyptian Environment Minister, Dr. Yasmin Foued, has arrived in Cali, Colombia, for the high-level segment of the United Nations COP16 Biodiversity Conference, which will run from October 29th to November the 1st. The conference will see the launch of the Global Peace with Nature Alliance. The theme, a call for life. Dr. Foued expressed that the world looks forward to concrete results from this pivotal conference, as COP16 aims to implement the global biodiversity framework established in COP15, including the goal to protect 30% of land by 2030 and enhance financing mechanisms to support biodiversity preservation, especially for developing nations. Egypt's Housing and Urban Communities Minister, Sharif El-Shabini, has announced the agenda for the 12th World Urban Forum, which is set to take place in Cairo from November 4th to the 8th with global participation. The forum will discuss sustainable housing, urban development and technological transformations centered on human welfare. El-Shabini highlighted that Egypt was chosen to host this event due to its rich architectural diversity and adaptive urban solutions, underscoring the country's contributions to sustainable urban development over the past decade. And a half-century after the iconic Rumble in the Jungle, the Congolese capital is gearing up for anniversary celebrations, honouring the heavyweight bout that inspired generations of boxers. On October 30th, 1974, underdog Muhammad Ali triumphed over the then undefeated champion George Foreman in a match that became legendary. In anticipation of the festivities organised by the Democratic Republic of Congo's presidency and the US Embassy, 20 boxers from across Africa recalled the historic fight while sparring at a sports ground in Kinshasa during an amateur championship this month. Back to you, Hala.
Thank you very much, Mark. And now we move to the latest developments in the economic sector. China's central bank has announced the initiation of outright reverse repos to enhance liquidity in the banking system and diversify its monetary policy tools. The People's Bank of China will conduct these reverse repurchase agreements monthly for up to a year, involving securities such as sovereign bonds, local government bonds, financial debentures, and corporate bonds. The bank executed 241.6 billion yuan in 7-day reverse repos at an interest rate of 1.5%. China has reiterated its warnings to the European Union, stating that separate negotiations with electric vehicle companies, while talks with China are ongoing, could shake mutual trust and disrupt the overall discussions. Both sides had clarified that price commitments continue to be the solution to the dispute and stated that the next phase of consultations have begun. This comes shortly after China and the EU agreed to engage in further technical negotiations regarding potential alternatives to tariffs on Chinese electric vehicles. Both sides emphasized that price commitments would remain central to resolving the dispute. Tech billionaire Elon Musk has claimed that he can cut around $2 trillion from the United States government's federal budget if Donald Trump wins the presidency. Musk laid out his vision for government spending cuts in the event of Trump's victory. Trump has said that he would ask Musk to lead an effort to cut government spending, nicknamed the Department of Government Efficiency, or DOGE, a reference to a cryptocurrency Musk has embraced.
We're going to get the government off your back and out of your pocketbook.
Boeing announced on Monday that it launched a stock offering aimed at raising up to $19 billion as the company seeks to improve its finances, which have been impacted by a month-long worker strike and ongoing safety issues. The offering includes 90 million shares of common stock and $5 billion in depository shares tied to convertible preferred stock. This financial move comes as Boeing faces significant challenges, including the halt of production for its popular 737 MAX aircraft due to strike involving approximately 33,000 mechanics that began in September. That company is also dealing with a regulatory imposed cap on its production of MAX jets following a mid-air incident earlier this year. In commodities, oil prices fell almost $4 a barrel after Israel's strike on Iran, with both Brent and U.S. West Texas Intermediate crude futures reaching their lowest levels since October the 1st. Brent was trading 5.43% lower at $71.92 a barrel. U.S. West Texas Intermediate dropped 5.63% to $67.74 a barrel. Most global shares traded higher today as markets await key economic data from the United States as the elections approach. The United States, the S&P 500 was 0.5% higher. The Dow Jones Industrial Average was up 0.6% and the Nasdaq Composite traded 0.7% higher. In Europe, France's CAC 40 traded 0.7% higher, while Germany's DAX rose 0.5% and Britain's FTSE 100 added nearly 0.2%. In Asia, Japan's benchmark Nikkei 225 surged 1.8%. South Korea's Kospi edged up 1.1%, and Hong Kong's Hang Seng added less than 0.1%, while the Shanghai Composite rose 0.7%. And that brings us to the end of our news bulletin. Here is what we have been covering. Iran's president emphasizes that Iran will respond appropriately to the Israeli strikes. Israel claims to have damaged Iran's ability to defend itself and to produce missiles. And Israel orders residents of 14 villages in southern Lebanon to evacuate immediately. And this concludes our news bulletin for this hour. Don't forget to follow Q News on YouTube, Facebook, X, Instagram, and TikTok at QNewsEG to stay informed for real-time updates. Connect with us on the UMS digital platform. Watch it. Thanks for watching and stay tuned for more updates here on Q News.